I am just gonna turn something off on that so that you all can see everybody. There, now we can see everybody.
Oh, fine, yeah. We're not this one, you know.
Okay. Good afternoon. It is Wednesday, March 13th. Rabbi is at the CCAR conference with other Reform rabbis. I leave for Israel on Friday. And I guess I'll preface it that with, I preface this all with, I've been to Israel many times. I studied there. I visited kids who were my personal kids who were studying there. And I think it's going to be a hard trip for me. We're going to visit some of the kibbutzim where, you know, the massacres happened. That area is called Otef Gaza, the envelope. So I will be located in Tel Aviv, and we'll be visiting those surrounding kibbutzim, and we'll also be going to where the Nova Music Festival was. And that is, it's a memorial. It's a memorial now. And I think, you know, we're going to do some packing. It'll be right before Purim. And of course, it's a mitzvah to pack mishloach manot or Purim packages. And so we might be doing some of that for either a kibbutz or the soldiers. However, and I'm going with the Eye Center. And some of the information I'm sharing with you today is from the Eye Center. And that's an educational consortium. It's right here on the North Shore. I do some consulting for them, and they work to educate Israel educators. And we didn't have class, was it last week or two weeks ago? Because I went to this class, conflicts of interest, and I'll be sharing you some of the things I learned there. And I believe the Eye Center does a great job. They're not from any political party, try to be even-handed, but obviously they are very pro-Israel. And in these difficult days, even at the Academy Awards, where we had a Jewish presenter say, you know, I don't want to be Jewish anymore, and he doesn't agree with what's happening in Gaza. And he won for the movie Zone of Interest, which is about not Auschwitz, but living right outside, next door to Auschwitz. So it's a very complicated political world, which we live in today, which our kids live in today. And you know, I hope that this class has taught you, and you know, you can learn to go online, and you have to get, you know, the right information and find the right places to trust the information. And sometimes that's not easy. So I think we left off about the 67 war last time. And so my timeline, so 67, it was June. And you can tell if it's an Israeli talking to you because they call it the 6 Days War, plural on the days. And we call it the 6-Day War. And that was in June for 6 days. We got a lot of territory and really put Israel for the first time, not as the underdog, and also as an occupier. And I have some maps that I'll show you in a minute. And then in 1967, the Arab League meets in Khartoum. And again, nothing really came out of that. And things ramped up again until October 1973, the Yom Kippur War. And I think, someone was sharing with us last week, or it could have been in my book group, I'm not sure, but, Helen Mirren was in a wonderful movie, about, she played Golda Meir.
That was his group.
Okay, good. It was this group. And, it's really about all the decisions she had to make around, the Yom Kippur War. And another, and this is it was a play, called The Balcony. And everybody in Israel, everyone knows that there's, a city in the south called Dimona. And that's where they were working on, atomic bombs. And so this play showed how Golda was very influential in having the atomic bomb, having that procedure go through. And I think it's just common knowledge now that Israel has atomic weapons. And again, after watching Oppenheimer, and he received a lot of awards, I'm an Oscars fan. But he dedicated his Oscar to the peacemakers, which I thought was poignant. Then we go on, March 79, Israel and Egypt signed a peace treaty. As a result of that peace treaty, we start to give back, the Sinai, and that was in 3 different times. And it went by, lines on the map. And then June 1982, Operation Peace for the Galilee. It's very interesting how Israel names these conflicts and wars. And that was the first Lebanon War. And of course, that's on the north. And I will say that one reason we're not sure exactly how our trip will pan out next week is because I think it looks like things are heating up on the northern border. And that's Hezbollah. It's coming in from Lebanon. And I know that they've let some of the kids who were in the reserves, the Miluim, they let them go home, but I think some of them will be called up again and they'll have to go north. Yeah, Sandy, real loud.
My grandson, who was in Gaza for 4.5 months, now is on the Syrian border, the Golan Heights, because they're watching the Syrians at night especially. So they take turns sleeping 4 hours during the day. The guys take turns so that they can stay up all night and watch, because that's where they squeeze up. Yeah, Golan.
If you've been on a regular tourist trip to Israel, which I'm assuming everybody has, or if you live there, you know that when you're up north, you go to any of these kibbutzim, you can see into Syria, Lebanon, you can see it with your eyes. So I'm not surprised that, that people are up, that we're watching this, and, I'm praying that things stay quiet. Well, we'll talk about what's going to happen with a ceasefire in a minute. Continuing on with our timeline, 1987 started the first Intifada, and the Intifada is the Palestinians and the Arabs really had a what's the word? A coordinated strike, terrorist offenses, bus bombings, and it absolutely hurt Israel. I also think it hurt them as well, because when the tourists are down, it's not just Jewish people who run those shops, or Jewish people who have, Jewish Israelis who are running the buses and the cabs and all of that. So I think that sometimes, and you can see it very clearly in the old city, because you have, the Arab section, the Jewish section, the Armenian section, and the Christian section. And so that's the first Intifada. 1993, Israel and the PLO signed the Oslo Accord. If only that had stuck. Again, they decided, the Arabs pulled out of that. And mid-1990s, terror attacks, rock Israel. In July 2000, President Clinton convenes Camp David Summit. Now, I was in Israel in the summer of 2000. Ben Yehuda Street, which is a commercial avenue in Jerusalem with, all the tchotchke stores, was packed. It was wall to wall humanity, and the tourists sees them, and you could go down there. You heard a lot of English, but I ran into you run into people. It was amazing time to be there. And then in October of 2000, 2 IDF reservists were murdered by a Palestinian mob. And it was the next year, that was also when Ariel Sharon went on top of the Temple Mount. And that just caused a flurry of terrorists and unease. And why he did that, I just don't know. He is very conservative. And he had a stroke and they kept him alive for years and years and years. And, I don't know what his mental health was at that time, but Vanessa, I'm not speaking for McCombs. I thought it was a terrible mistake. And then, of course, in 2001, 9/11, and I actually visited Israel, and they were having terrible terrorist attacks. I visited in November of 2001, and it was a ghost town. And this is how I know it's a ghost town. My Hebrew is okay, but usually when I go, they speak to me in English. But when I went in 2001, everyone spoke to me in Hebrew. They just figured, if you're here, you got to know Hebrew. And we were in a hotel that hadn't been used, and I have terrible asthma, and it was dusty. I mean, the things that you remember and stick in your head. And we bought a lot. I bought a lot of things because you feel terrible. These merchants were really, this is how they make a life. This is how they feed their families. In August of 2005, we have the Gaza disengagement. There were beautiful, beautiful Jewish settlements in Gaza. And as part of, peace accords in Oslo, Israel disengaged. And I remember because I was there again, I think, either in 2005 or 2004. And if you were for the people staying there, you wore orange. And if you wanted them to leave, you wore blue. And the country was very, very divided on whether these people should get out of Gaza. And of course, when they were in Gaza, not unlike Hebron, you have to protect them. So that puts, the soldiers in a terrible, terrible bind. And the thing that I keep reminding myself, these soldiers are between 18 and 21. They are babies. Their frontal lobe is not developed. I'm sure and look, there are some other older people. And in this Gaza war, they've called up people, who are very old. I was talking to a friend, and her husband, who was 55, was called up, and I was like, he must have a very important job. He was called up at 55. So, and then in June 2007, Hamas takes control of Gaza. Hamas, we have seen that they have proclaimed in the news and that they, don't want Israel, they're going to keep doing this and interrupt. And as much as Mahmoud Abbas, who is, the Fatah representative, and he was in the West Bank, I mean, he looks reasonable compared to Sinar. And Sinar is the head of Hamas. In Hebrew, Homentashen are called Oznei Haman, or Haman's ears. But in all the stores in Israel, it says Oznei Sinar. So, I am gonna be there for quorum. I'm not sure. Hopefully people will be able to gather and celebrate. I just don't know. I mean, it feels like every day things are changing. In August 2020, the US brokers, the Abraham Accords. And then, of course, we know what happened October 7th, 2023. I was just talking with someone, and the tourism now in Israel are these missions of educators and rabbis, and we have a member, Denise Goldberg. You can go with JUF, and there's this. Pardon?
URJ went.
Yes, URJ went, yeah. And somebody called it, tragedy tourism. So, but look, I'm gonna be staying in a hotel, I'm gonna be going to restaurant. I mean, it does help the economy in some teeny tiny way to at least have some flow of people. I know that some of the big trips, our 8th graders usually go on a program called Israel Now. That was canceled. They're going to California. Don't ask me. I don't understand the reasoning behind that. I think Birthright is finally up and running, but I'm sure it's not the tourism that it was. It's probably a lot of volunteering. When they call people up to Miluim, to the reserves, and you live on a kibbutz or you're a farmer, these crops aren't being harvested. And people are going to help with all of those different tasks. Sandy.
I made a call. I thought I was calling Skokie. I'm sure all of you know who David Jacobson is, from Chicago Jewish Funerals. I was calling him to tell him we finally decided to pay for our funerals. Because that's what people our age do now, so that their kids aren't virgin with you. I call him, he answers, he's in Israel.
Yeah.
I mean, he's talking to me. I was shocked that he would even answer the phone. I was shocked that he had given me his personal number. Anyway, he's here and he's volunteering, and he has children that say down and down. He lives here, so he's such a wonderful person.
He's a wonderful person. He has one child who's getting married and one child whose wife is giving birth.
Right.
So, and we just called him from here, and it was over Shabbat, but we had someone who died here and had to get to Michigan, and going over state lines when you're dead is very hard. And he just helped us out. He is really a mensch. And it wasn't his funeral. He wasn't making any money. But yes, I think he's still in Israel.
Yeah, I think he went for about 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
He did just go for a couple of weeks.
So, this takes us up to, again, October 7th, and the war. Let me just make sure I have the right thing up. And I just want to show you some maps.
No, this is done.
I know, just give me a minute. Okay, now it's on the screen.
Okay.
So, the Gaza Strip is a teeny tiny area. That's this one. Let's see if I can make it. There we go. All the places that we're talking about, Rafah in the south, Jabalia in the north, and you see it in the big, it's teeny tiny, although again, close to where all the kibbutzim were, and not that far from Tel Aviv. Okay, let me stop share, go back and get my map here. Okay, I'll give you some talking points here. It's often referred to as the Gaza Strip. In Hebrew, it's Aza. So, Gaza, Aza. I think the Arabic is Gaza. It's not the same territory as the West Bank. Those are two separate things. I'm sure some people are confused by that. Is the Gaza envelope the same as the Gaza Strip? No, the Gaza envelope refers to the Israeli towns and communities that border the Hamas-run Gaza Strip. Many of these communities on October 7th were infiltrated by Hamas terrorists. Hamas runs Gaza. And I don't think anyone here would ask, do Israelis live in Gaza? They don't.
Can I have a question?
Yes, questions, go.
So the kibbutzim.
Yeah.
That are right there.
Yep.
As well as those settlements. Were those created pre or post the Gaza Strip demarcation? Because then the question becomes why? Okay, so, I mean, to me, I understand that the jeopardy that they're in, but why are they there? Becomes my question.
Right. So, one, those communities were within the green line. Again, that part of Israel was promised to Israel.
Well, yes,
Okay?
well, we went through this.
Through the
last night.
partition.
And, okay,
Okay.
right.
Um,
But were they, so when the Gaza Strip.
that's been there forever.
Okay,
And it was set aside for them forever. Now, I have a cousin in Beersheba, and she's been there since,
to me, that's a different part of the.
it
country.
is, but she's been there since the early 80s.
Right.
And she used to go to Gaza and go to the beach, go to the shuk, to the market. I mean, there was like a flow. As there were more terrorists coming out of Gaza, they erected, whether you call it a security fence, a wall, whatever. So I would say that one, land in Israel is at a premium. They keep having more and more people, so you have to populate somewhere. And if you want to be in the green line, you don't want to go to the West Bank. And really, Ben Gurion is the first one who want to populate the Negev. And he is buried on his kibbutz. All right, what's the name of his kibbutz? Stay Boker. And it's beautiful. I mean,
And Golda is buried in the Negev also.
is she?
In her daughter's kibbutz.
Oh, okay.
See, to me though, and I have, my best friend's daughter lives in Beersheba.
Uh-huh.
Okay, but that's kind of, that community was built really on this oasis to take land back. But to me, I don't associate that with Gaza.
Right.
Okay, it didn't abut Gaza.
Right.
Okay, and that's, that becomes, to me, that's problematic.
But
is
if they
that-
were there before the problems started in Gaza,
But-
there used to be a settlement in Gaza of Israelis.
Yeah. Okay, and that was my question. Was it pre or, you said Gaza has been there forever.
Yeah.
Okay, has the partition been there forever? So.
The
to me,
partition's
if
been
you're
there-
On the line.
Yeah.
If you're on the line next to this area, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Sandy, I'm Googling something.
It's a real good question. Yeah, I don't know the answer as far as Bay Area and a few of those kibbutzim. But I know of a young man who is the son of friends of ours. And he lived on a kibbutz right there. I don't know if it's not Oz, I have to see the map. He's lived there in the 70s. We visited him. We lived in Beersheba from 74 on. So I know there was
Right.
also a moshav. There was all Americans, the tomato moshav. I don't even think it exists today, but there were settlements. Whether those particular, I understand your question, why they were so close to the borders and how many years they've been there. I don't know the.
Yeah, and that's.
So here's your answer.
To me, it goes to a lot of the issues we have today is that when we say, well, we have to protect these kibbutzim.
Right.
did those keep singing? Were they created understanding that they were sitting on a powder keg?
No, absolutely
Okay,
not. So
so
I have the
that's-
thing.
Okay,
Near Oz was founded in 1950. Berry, 1946. Near Am, 1943. Near Yitzchak, 1949.
so they were there before.
Yeah, they had no idea that, Gaza would be a powder keg of terrorists and
Mhm.
bombs and the whole 9 yards.
Okay.
And that is really long time ago. And I think that it's only become, I don't want to say problematic. I mean, Gaza's always been overcrowded and terrible services and all of that. But, not until 2005, but there used to be Jews who lived in Gaza. Israelis, I should say.
There's a
Israeli
cemetery,
Jews.
Jewish cemetery from the 1700s in Gaza. We don't know where it is
And they were-
because they may have plowed it under.
And there were many Palestinians who lived in Israel.
Yes.
Okay, so that becomes, okay, we can do a lot of finger pointing on that.
Right,
But I asked the question
right,
because I wanted to know, was it kind of pre or post
right.
that situation?
Let me see, Sderot, which is, we've heard about these many years. Because that was really built up and that's bombed, bombed.
I learned something this week.
Yeah.
44%. Hamas was elected by 44% of the eligible voters when it was about 17, 18 years ago. And there's never been an election since, but it was only 44%.
Well, our
I thought- I
country
heard a
only
lower number.
elects their president.
Yeah. I heard a much lower number,
It could be.
more like 24.
So Sderot was founded in 1951 as a transit camp for 80 families. I think you could go with that argument that that's been built up, and they knew what's been happening there. But, I would say when the dates of these, when they were founded, they had, no idea. And because it was part of the partitioned Israel, and here you have Ben Gurion saying, settle the Negev, settle the Negev. And when you go to Israel and you see what Israelis have done with the desert, with drip irrigation and making it bloom, and now tourism, it's amazing. And unfortunately, when you go to either Arab Israeli villages or Palestinian Israeli villages, their public services aren't as good. It's dirtier. It's just. And I can't imagine that their education is as good as what these Jewish Israelis have. And one of my favorite stories is Syed Kashua is an Arab Palestinian Israeli. In fact, he was at U of I for a while, and when he came to U of I as a professor, who was he friends with? All the Israeli professors, because, they all come from Israel, and they told him, here, this is where you go for a winter coat, and you're going to need this, and you're going to need that. It's cold here. And he has an article, which I have to find, and he came home once, and he sent his children to an Israeli secular school. And he hears his daughter practicing on the violin, Hatikva. And he says to his wife, why is she playing Hatikva? That's not our national music. And the wife says, go in there and you tell her what our national music is and blah, blah, blah. So he goes in there, he has the long talk, and, the kid's like, yeah. And then finally she said, Dad, I have to practice this for school tomorrow. So he has, if you haven't read anything by Syed Kashua, I think his writing is beautiful, and I know we have some books in here by him, but I think that shows you really the conflict. Here is an educated man. He is a journalist, he is a writer, and he sent his kids to secular Israeli schools, knowing that would be a better education.
I want this to share with you.
What is it?
This is a book It was written, you probably remember this story, this fighting. in
Tell me the
Gaza.
name of the book.
I Shall Not Hate. It's written by a Gazan doctor, Zeldin Abulaj. And I got it through the library, so I've just read the foreword. But I wanted so much to read this because I remember listening to him before October 7th. And he was the one that lived in Gaza near the border. He worked in a Tel Aviv hospital, and a tank, an Israeli tank, approached his building, and they had been warned, do not touch that building. This is before this war, the last war. And this tanker saw some movement in a window, and he shot in and blew up that apartment. 3 or 4 girls were killed in that apartment. 2 of them were his daughters, 2 or 3 of them were his daughters, and 1 was his niece. And they were killed. Yeah, the Israeli government apologized to him. And he had many friends in the Jewish medical corps in Israel. But now he lives in Toronto. I think he just had to get away. And he was offered a position in Toronto at a hospital. And this is his book, I Shall Not Hate. And when this war started, and they were talking about leadership, I kept on thinking they could just bring him back to Gaza,
No,
and he could be
Well,
the prime minister.
well, that's
And
not
we
gonna
get-
happen,
We
yeah,
get somebody else other than.
right, on our side too,
Yeah.
yeah.
Why does it look like the Palestinians is so well financed and they're doing a much better job in the United States than the Jews are? I mean, that's all you hear about is the Palestinian point of view.
I don't think that it looks like, I don't know where you're
Well,
coming from.
I think it does. I watch the news, I watch all the news.
You're talking, yeah, they have a lot more, I think they have a very sympathetic message, but in terms of being well financed and.
Well,
where does
all I
that
know
come
is they're
from?
all over the country. They're in various universities. Someone's paying the bill.
No, I don't know that I
I mean,
necessarily agree with
in
that
Cleveland, they
assumption.
send hundreds of cars to block the airport with, support Palestine. Someone's gotta be financing this.
So
I
I don't know this
agree
for
with
sure, and I know what you're saying. I think that there's other Israeli protests, there's been
Right.
protests in New York, but they don't show that as much on the news. And I think a lot of it is Arab oil money. I went to the University of Michigan, and I remember, a long time ago when I was in college, they had a new Arab chair or Arab department, and it was all being financed from oil. And we were talking about my mother before. She lives in Crystal Lake, and there's 3 Democrats there, my mother and her 2 friends. And her friend was at it was a fundraiser for Lauren Underwood, and Jan Schakowsky was there. And you had to buy a ticket to go in. And there were all these Arab Palestinian protesters who disrupted the whole luncheon and the speeches. And I said to my mother, and I don't know, I said, somebody bought them tickets. They were kids. They don't have money to go to this luncheon. And what I think has changed, especially in the past, I'll say, I think it was going on for maybe 18 months, is that how organized they've gotten and how Israel just sat on its laurels. I have heard different things, and I really should look it up for you, but that a woman captain was trying to blow the whistle on October 7th, and they won't listen to her.
Oh, definitely. It was
Yeah.
a woman.
It was a woman. And I also think it was the Simchat Torah. So in the West Bank, they were having, there are a lot of religious settlements. So they had to send a lot of the army there to protect them. So, you're drawing people away, and then you have Gaza, and they're coming in, and they were just so organized. If anyone was here, the Sunday morning I had a couple whose daughter died on October 7th. And she might have been at Nero's, but this is the story that they told. The dad was there visiting because it was Simchat Torah, people got the day off. And he was in a guest house. And she was in her regular house and they were talking on the phone. And the daughter said, Dad, don't come here, stay where you are. And they knew exactly where to go. They came in, they killed her, and they booby trapped the room she was in. Her kids, I think, were with the husband and the kid, or no, with a neighbor. The kids lived. So I said, it was Jackie and Yaron. I said, how did they know? How did they know where to go? And she said, the people who work in their kibbutz are Arab, who do the cleaning or whatever. And they had given lists to the intelligence. She said they knew where they lived, where they kept their money, where everything was. And I was speechless, which, doesn't happen often. And I just couldn't believe it. And so as we talk about rebuilding, I think some of these kibbutzim in the envelope are going to have a hard time going back there and trusting and trying. Usually in Israel, I don't know, they're in downtown Jerusalem. They have a pizza place, a Sabara, and it would be bombed, and literally by the next day, it's the glass is back up and they're reopened. They're not bouncing back, and these kibbutzim, and we're going to these places. That's where I'll be next week at this time, to see that it's still there. It's like they left with breakfast on the table. So, how this is gonna end, I just don't know.
Well, one of the men who was.
Wait, what's that?
Shush.
Wait, Elaine, go ahead.
Do you think the people should go back there because of the danger and the proximity to the terrorists and stuff?
I can't answer that for them. That's gonna have to be a personal, all right, so we have Jeff and then I have Susan. Jeff?
Is there any difference between like settlements in northern Israel close to the Lebanese border or in, southern Israel close to the Egyptian border? Is there something particularly dangerous about being close to the Gaza?
Yes, because Hamas is there.
Yeah.
But you have Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Yeah.
In Lebanon, yes.
Yes.
So that's my question.
I don't think the Egyptian border is.
I mean, yeah, you
Yeah.
have peace with Egypt, but I'm
Yeah,
just saying,
yeah,
when
you're
all the
right.
settlements were
Right.
made, they were basically in the same boat.
Yeah. I think that because of Iron Dome, which of course that money has come from the United States,
Mhm.
that keeps them safe in the north. Because there's a lot of bombs coming through, and if you get an app called the Red Alert, you can see where in Israel these bombs are falling. And this Hamas thing was orchestrated, and they got through the wires, and they had Israeli army uniforms on. You don't do that overnight. You don't go to those kibbutzim, chick-chock. They had been practicing. And I just don't, for me, it's I would love to blame it all on Bibi Netanyahu. Susan, then Sandy.
Can you hear me? Okay, I had to walk out for a few minutes, so if I'm repeating anything you've already said, Vanessa, please stop me. As I think this group knows, and I've said it before, my son was there not long ago, volunteering, and he was at Kibbutz Be'eri, and he also went to where the music festival had been, and he talked to a lot of survivors. And apparently they got a tremendous amount of help from the Palestinians that were working on the kibbutz and that were working even outside in Israel. They helped Hamas through this whole thing. And so obviously I have to say my son doesn't have a whole lot of regard for any Palestinians after the things he heard. And one of the things we had a discussion, our family did just not long ago with him, because he was explaining to the younger members of our family what he had seen. And he said, one of the problems with the people that are so sympathetic now to what's happened to the Gazans and all the people that have been killed, he said, for 75 years, Israel has been attacked. And every time, and Vanessa, you went through the whole thing and all the times that they have been at war with the Palestinians and with Arab countries. And every time Israel has responded, they responded very, very limited. They always did a limited response. And this time, they refuse to do that. They want to destroy what has been trying to destroy them for 75 years. And I think that's the difference in the thinking, anyway, from people who feel that there should be so much sympathy.
Yeah, and it's a rift in the Jewish people. It's a rift with our young folks, my own personal children, who live in DC, and they do a lot of walking, and we walk a lot, and free Gaza, free Palestine, all over their neighborhoods. When I was at the conflict of interests, we talked with Miri Eisen, and she's a former IDF colonel, and she said it's not terrorism, it's a war. And their 5 tiers of defense are the subterranean tunnels, urban area, terror army near schools. And Israel had never targeted civilian areas before this. Hostages is a tier of defense. And they're not humans for Hamas. They're a bargaining chip. International organizations, they are there to protect, say that they're there to protect civilians, but we have seen that the UN relief workers are holding some of these hostages. I have one more. In information warfare, it affects our younger generations and it makes people choose a side. Yeah, go ahead.
My question is, all my life I've heard about Ramadan, how holy it is, and yet they've always attacked us during Ramadan. All of a sudden we hear that we want to stop this right now before Ramadan starts. It's kind of contradictory. What exactly is it? I know Ramadan is supposed to last for a month, but I've always seen terrorists attack from the other side during this time period when it's supposed to be holy for them.
Right. I mean, so Ramadan, you can't eat from sunrise to sunset. And I know that Israel doesn't have daylight savings, so now we're only 7 hours, they're 7 hours ahead of us. And I, Vanessa, think that they'd use anything as a bargaining chip. They don't care what they say or how they say it. These people have no morals, and it'll be interesting to see, Miri's last thing, making people choose sides. You can be mad about the hostages. You can be mad about what they did to Israel and still be sympathetic with children starving in Gaza. And I think everyone in this room is.
Absolutely.
And I've read so many articles, and I have half of them here. But that one convey of food where the IDF, killed some people. And again, there were probably 18-year-olds who were scared out of their minds, and people were, flying at this food. And what happens with the food in Gaza is that Hamas takes it and resells it. And they have enough food probably to last them for 5-10 years. I don't know, because they take all the money, this relief money, and they have these giant subterranean tunnels, and they use all of it for that. So after that happened with Israel going in, then the US dropped food, and it dropped on people and killed 5 people. And then I saw that they're making.
Now they're doing the ports.
Right.
That might be
But
interesting.
that's
They're
6
gonna
months
have,
down
they're
the
gonna have
road.
ports for the first time, which
Yes.
is very interesting.
It is.
Or in modern times.
In modern
But that's still 6 months down the road.
Yeah,
though.
still wind
Well,
up.
the
Yeah.
ports on the ship.
Right. Sandy.
I do raise my hand when I want.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
In answer to a question that was asked here about 3 people back,
Yeah.
would these people go back?
Oh.
I was at the JCC and we had 3 survivors come and speak to us. One was a man who was about maybe 68, I'm guessing, and they very nice. I was impressed by the 2 women and the man they had here. And that was the question that was asked of him.
Oh, what did he say?
said, people my age and older will come back. But people who have young children will have to think long and hard before they will bring their young families back and expose them to anything. But the older people who have lived there love that place so that they are the ones who are willing to come back.
So we have about 15 more minutes, and I'm gonna put this up on the screen in a hot minute. Here are some of the key points on, contention. So, point number 1, the right to exist. So what kind of explicit recognition of Israel's right to exist would Palestinian leaders have to offer in order to assuage Israelis' concerns? I don't know if that can ever happen. It's in their, you know, I was gonna say their platforms, their, you know, their mission and vision.
When you say theirs, who are you referring to?
Hamas.
Hamas,
I'm referring to Hamas right now.
okay.
You know, could we have peace in the West Bank? And I think at one time the 2-state solution of the West Bank and Gaza, I just don't know if that can happen.
Well, I think that the issues here are, it's Palestinians are on record of saying, we're not gonna give you anything.
Right.
So it's like all or nothing.
Right.
Right? That's really what you're saying.
Right.
Right.
Can Israel officially and unequivocally embrace the notion of Palestinian statehood in some part of the territory between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River? I had the high school kids here this weekend, and everyone has heard from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And I said to our kids, I go, what river? And they're like, they gave me the like, I don't know. And then I said, what sea? And one kid goes, the Mediterranean. I go, okay. Well,
Genius.
I didn't think that.
I didn't say the density.
Exactly. So, and I think when these college kids protest, that they don't know, they have no idea what they're protesting there. What would be the impact if one side does not speak in a unified voice, meaning there are multiple viewpoints on this matter within Palestine or Israeli leadership? I mean, listen, as much as we're talking about the Palestinian leadership, I have a very dim view of the Israeli leadership. Again, Vanessa speaking, I think Bibi, is keeping this going. So, because the minute this war is over, he's going to be indicted, I hope, and thrown into jail. I don't know that for sure, but we can only hope. Not unlike, anyway, I won't go on.
Yes,
I'm going. High migrant spirits. Exactly. Thank you, Janet. How might the borders of the state of Israel be drawn? How might the borders of a future Palestinian state be drawn? What concessions might both sides need to make in order to define borders for 2 states? Is this realistic anymore? I just don't know. And then if you went to one state, and there are many people, there are some people who look at a 1-state solution. That means there would be a Democratic majority, and that may, I don't know if that would be if the Jewish Israelis would be no, they won't. It's giving me the no.
No, I just saw latest statistics.
Yeah.
They're just about 2% out now. What? There are more Arabs. When you put all the people together.
There's a difference
Gaza,
between
West Bank,
Arabs, there's
I'm
Arab
thinking.
Israelis and Palestinians. So on your statistics, was it Arabs or was it Palestinian?
Taking the whole piece of land together, Gaza, the West Bank, and what is now Israel, all together, there are 2% less Israelis than Palestinians.
Palestinians, or my question is it Palestinians or Arabs? Because when you look at the full Arab population, many of them want to be part of the Israeli state. They are not Palestinian.
I know that, Janet. I know a
Okay, so
lot of
that's why I'm just
Palestinians that
asking.
would like to stay in Israel.
No, the
But that was
question,
not the question.
my
We're just
question-
talking about population
Sandy,
numbers
Sandy, my question is your stats. Is it Arabs or Palestinians? That's the question I'm asking.
together. Jews
Okay,
and
so
Arabs.
it's Arabs.
Yeah,
Jews and
yeah.
Arabs.
Settlements. What are the implications of continued expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, which
Yeah.
again, Bibi Netanyahu favors? Are there parts of the West Bank that both sides might agree to leave under permanent Israeli control and sovereignty? I can tell you this, that Jerusalem to Bethlehem, you used to, you'd leave Jerusalem, you'd be out in the desert, Bethlehem. The urban sprawl is like one big continuous. It's not unlike here. The urban sprawl, Crystal Lake used to be a bedroom community, and now people just go into Chicago, and it's part of the suburbs. Jeff,
This was part of the class. Who were the people who were supposed to respond to this? And they asked this,
Yeah.
is this like me and my friends talking about something where we have no expertise, no knowledge, but we have opinions? And when this was presented to the
Yeah.
group there, are these people who are very well versed in politics and the history and what's possible, or are these just people who have opinions?
so good question. And, I'm not going to toot my own horn, but it was educators, not unlike me, who've had a lot of experience in this, couple rabbis. And this is for us to be able to go out and teach the conference. This is not, I don't know if it's table talk or whatever, but this is to give us talking points and kind of break things down for people who just have opinions. And another Zohar Raviv, who is a wonderful educator, if you ever have a chance to take any of his classes, he said that, especially our kids today, he said it's like swimming on top of the, sea. That's where they gather all of their information. And to do this correctly, as you were intimating, you have to take a deep dive. You have to look at things, you have to study things. I think, Rabbi did a great job. Ottoman Empire, Palestine, Israel. And I hope that we have a little bit more, we can talk about it with more
And I'm not
clarity.
criticizing, but I know what I'm like, and
Right.
I'll talk on anything, have an opinion, and I know nothing,
You know more than you think. You know more than you think, and it's important to watch the news and to come to these classes and adult enrichment. Listen, Jeff, if I gave out a certificate, you would get it. Bagels. Then we have the refugees. Should Israel provide compensation for Palestinians who are displaced? How might Palestinians resolve the tension between returning to the actual lands where they or their ancestors live versus living in an independent Palestine? The book that I recommend for that is The Lemon Tree, which talks about Jewish Israelis who live in a house that has a lemon tree and it belonged to a Palestinian, and that person comes back. But when we were discussing this in the class, someone said, what about the Jewish refugees? Because after October 7th, many of all these kibbutzniks are being housed in hotels, in the Dead Sea area, in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem. And the government is compensating them, and they also compensate the kids who go into Miluim, into the reserves. So how the Israeli economy can handle this, I have literally no idea. Security. Would a future Palestinian state have an army, as the Palestinians have demanded, or would it be demilitarized as the Israelis have demanded? Somebody asked this, I think, at the beginning of this class. It could have been another class. Israeli Arabs are not required to serve in the army. The Druze, they serve, some of the Bedouin serve, but so these, if you had a two-state, you'd have to look into this type of security. And water. So this is something that, living in, outside of Chicago and Lake Michigan, literally a stone's throw, we don't think about water. Can the precedent set in the Jordanian peace agreement in which Israel provides fresh water resources to Jordan be emulated in an Israeli-Palestinian deal? Water is huge there, huge, huge, huge. Who has it? Who controls it? Where is it? I'll never forget, Arthur and I were in Israel for junior year abroad, and we've been there a year, and we went traveling to Italy, and we get to Italy, and they have all those fountains, the Trevi Fountain, and we're like, they're wasting water. That was our first thought. Yeah, how can that be? Anyway, how might Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians share water resources? To what extent is Israel responsible for ensuring that Palestinians have adequate water resources? And so these are the points of contention. And, there's no easy answers. If there was an easy answer, they would have found it. Sandy.
Before the war, before this October, I think in Gaza, they got water and electricity from Israel 4 to 5 hours a day. That was all. Never more than 5 hours a day. I don't know how that works. I really don't understand it, but that was one of their points of contention. I have a question for you. I've lived in Israel. I don't know the answer to this. If we're talking about a two-state, there's the West Bank here, and then there's Gaza down here, and they're connected by Israel. How would they have a Palestinian state?
I don't know.
And how do they travel now from one place to the other?
Well, I'll tell you how that I can answer. First of all, not only are they not connected, but you have Hamas in Gaza Strip, and you have Fatah in the West Bank, and two different governing groups. And the way they travel, because you had a lot of Palestinians working at these kibbutzim, is there's checkpoints. And there's it could take you, 2-3 hours if you're these checkpoints are terrible. You have the Israeli army, again, you have an 18-year-old kid, standing there, and he's tired and hungry and you name it. And these checkpoints are real.
Yeah.
Listen, we've all been, whether we're flying in the United States or when you're flying to Israel for sure, and you see them take out the Arab passenger, and when you fly to Israel, and you go to Ben Gurion, profile. And when I went with my dad, he said, I'm Saba, which is Hebrew for grandfather. And they're like, why do you know Hebrew? And they started in on him. And that was the only word he knew. So he was like, I don't know.
That's the sad story.
Yeah.
We have a friend, he was my oldest daughter's boyfriend. I often wondered why she didn't marry him. He was so wonderful.
Unlike her current husband.
Yes.
Yeah, she married someone here, not out of our faith, and then got divorced many years later. But Avi always was my heart. This boy would come into our home, and I just adored him. But anyway, they have kept their friendship since the war. They just started since October, and she's located him, and they send movies back and forth of his children, her children, and he lives at Yad Mordechai. He's a kibbutz number. That's not far from Gaza. There's Ashkelon, then there's Yad Mordechai, and then there's Gaza. He had a Palestinian, he said, working on his crops. He's in charge of certain crops at the kibbutz. This man, he said, was so wonderful and has worked for him for so many years. He cannot get a pass now to come.
Right.
He's not from Gaza, he's from the West Bank and has a family there he has to support, and he isn't allowed through any checkpoints to come work for him. He said he's still sending him a salary because he wants him to come back, and he wants him to be able to survive this time with his family. There are Israelis and Arabs that have such close contact.
I
and
think
such love
the
for
most
each other.
the most ironic thing is that those kibbutzim, they were peaceniks. They were really people who believed in the peace process. And then with all of this happening, are they gonna move back? I just have no idea. If you get the the newsletter, Rabbi Josh Weinberg, who was a student of mine, he said, why should I care? Why should we care about what's
They have a
happening?
program right now, by the way, that I'm missing.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
What's the, basically, what's really happening in Israel.
Right.
Okay. and
It's
I'm-
probably Josh. It's probably Josh.
It is Josh.
We've had him here before, I adore. We'll have to try to get him back. He comes back for the summer to go to Osroi. But I think that, you know, if I can leave you with, we have to care. We have to care about what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in Israel. And it's hard to keep up this level of involvement. And when the war started, and you know, the next day I was supposed to have Alan Green's son Richard here, and he's the CNN chief, and Rabbi's like, oh, maybe he can come. I said, he's not coming. It's a war. And I was thinking to myself, how am I going to keep educating? And look, if you had told me that in March I'm still educating, I would be like, yeah. And and it's not unlike the political situation here in the States of how do we keep, people, you have to vote. You have to vote here, you have to vote, Israelis need to vote in Israel, because to affect that type of change, we need different leaders. So I have lots of resources. If you need anything from me, it's good to see everybody. And you'll hear from me when I come back from Israel. I should be blogging, and if you're Facebook friends with me, you'll see all of that. And we'll put some on the Macomb Facebook as well.
Vanessa, have a safe trip.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank
You
you.
know what's a real challenge to me?
What?
Is there anybody among the people who, I don't think pro, I mean, the
Yeah.
supporters, I guess, who claim to care about the rights of Indians, who are opposed to the release of the Constitution?
I think that that's a fair point. That, at the Oscars, they had those people wearing red things, which was ceasefire,
Yeah.
but nobody had on a red thing and a yellow ribbon for the Oscars. All right, good to see everybody.
I think that